Then we have the New Age Outlaws versus the Hollies. It was the next match. And I'm very excited to talk about this match because I want to talk about the finish specifically, how you got there. But before we get to the finish, can't get over how popular the New Age Outlaws are in this moment. They're like right under Rock in Austin in terms of the crowd is singing along. For the outro, Road Dogg didn't even have the mic. They just played the song and the crowd did his shtick for him, like completely. Mm-hmm. They're so popular. And it's very interesting because I feel like Billy Gunn, good worker, not someone known for the mic, and Road Dogg, the opposite, known for being a great mic stick man, not so much a great worker. So it was a great combination. And I'm gonna have to
time you out there. I think he's a tremendous worker, personally.
Road Dogg?
Yeah. And
I guess what I would say is
weird dance moves and what have you, and maybe just physically not prototypical of the time, but also like whatever second generation, never bad spots, never miss, underrated.
Yeah, no, that's I don't want to say bad. It's I don't want to sound like
you fucked up.
Shit on him. I just mean like there's nothing. There's nothing too spectacular about him. He's perfectly capable. But just together, there's so much more.
Backhanded compliment. Perfectly capable.
Perfectly capable. Maybe I'm just offended by some of the stuff he said recently, but I just think
I don't know about that.
I think he has a podcast, or I don't know if he has it anymore, but he had some weird opinions. But no, I think they're great. Backhanded compliments aside, this is such a great package and a great spot for them to be in. This is the third match of the card, but it feels like the first like real match. Like the first two were just teasing the palate, and this is like the real match. Yeah. This had an actual story behind it, and we talked about this on the last show on SmackDown. The New Age Outlaws just lost their tag team titles to The Rock and Mick Foley, and the Hollies cost them the title. So that was the way to not make the Outlaws look weak and get the Outlaws here. And so what I want to know is with this, so how we get here now is you want the Hollies to win this match is how it's scheduled. But because the Outlaws are so popular, you don't want them to take two losses in a row because that would make them look weak. That would make them look like Herbs, and they're more over than the Hollies, so you don't want them to look like Herbs. So you end up doing a DQ finish, and I'm curious how you got to this, because I'm assuming that Billy Gunn and Road Dogg probably didn't want to take a pin. They didn't want to. Obviously, nobody wants to submit. And the edict maybe from Vince was that the Hollies have to win, so you have to do the DQ. Ultimately, I was a little disappointed with the DQ finish. I know it's very much of the time. Right. I like a good clean finish, sure. But I understand why you had to get to it based on how the booking was.
Yeah, well, sometimes these things aren't exactly like followed through exactly like the linear way you just laid out. Sometimes they are. I would say certainly there was good problems, meaning like, God, they're so over. The Rock and Sock connection's so over. There's this tag team thing. We don't want to blow off all our heat by having the, two huge things go after each other. So it's kind of like, let's peel them off. How can we, keep them hot and relevant for a while? And then also, you got to remember too that like you can look back and be like, oh, they're so over. Here's their decibel level of the audience. But the Hollies, whether they were over that much, they weren't over as much, but you can only, but potentially they were. So it's one of those things where, maybe it just makes sense to have some kind of like DQ there, because you want to people to keep their heat, and all at the same time. The Hollies were just starting to morph into like, I always love that dynamic of a tag team that would be on top if they could get along. You know what I mean? Because that can keep you relevant. That's for me, the trouble with booking, the hard stuff is like, how do you get people to lose and still remain relevant and hot? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, oh, internal strife. And that's always a good storyline. If only these cousins could fucking get along, they just might be fucking better than everyone. So that then you can ultimately, oh, maybe they'll fight each other in a program in future or whatever. So that's always like a good dynamic, but maybe not at the time that fast. You know what I mean? Things were, you didn't want to. Remember, there's talk about like maybe you don't want to pull that card immediately, like, oh, they lost, and then they're already maternal strife where they're going to face each other. So I think the teams were so resilient and hot enough. Like, yeah, that makes sense. DQ makes sense. And also, yeah, you don't want to do it 2-3 times in a pay-per-view, but it just kind of naturally, like, and also the pace of everything you're deciding, fine. And sometimes you might even say, and I can't remember, just to tell you about like the pace of everything. It may have been in the rundown, New Age Outlaws go over. And then maybe with the, an agent might get the match and come back, and there might be something I would even be watching later and like, oh, that's a different finish. Yeah, they talked it out and they figured they went to Vince and they figured this is a way to go. I can't even remember. A lot of times I can't. Yeah. So,
so your say isn't even the final say. You're not the final say on the matter.
No. No one is really, Vince is, but
Vince, yeah.
That happens a lot, that you'd look at rundowns and some finishes would be different. No problem. Especially, like I said, there's still a kayfabe room. The match still goes to an agent goes with the wrestlers and they'd be like, hey, we should do this. Or that's what was great about the Machine. A lot of people brought a lot of stuff. So you could see things that were, because a lot of times it was like, what are we doing with Austin and The Rock? You're always wanting some kind of like, for every time you see an outcome like that, there was other things about like, well, how about Austin gets hurt on the ribs and he comes back? How about this? You know what I mean? You're talking about all kinds of like possible scenarios, and then so that takes up a lot of your time. So yeah, you never know what can happen a lot. I'd say a good 20% of outcomes were like, that's not exactly the same. Or sometimes you'd say, so-and-so goes over, but you wouldn't know how, you know what I mean? And it might be something, and you're also like looking at what happens in matches as far as your storyline. There might be like a match where, oh, so-and-so goes over, but, let's say they get their ass beat the whole match and then they go over at the end, but the other, opponent made a really good showing or something happened, like, oh, we get to push them. So it isn't always like this cookie cutter. You lose, you're down. You win, you're up. There's some subjectivity to that.